All right, what's up, everybody? I am here today with Morley Robbins, founder and creator of the Root Cause Protocol. We decided it would be good for us to create a video and hop on a call together to answer some of the most common questions that we get at Formula IQ regarding the Root Cause Protocol. We've worked together now for many, many years on this, and we've created a line of products around it, in particular the Recuperate IQ, which we created in conjunction with Morley Robbins. And we thought it would be great to get together and just kind of have a discussion today of covering some of the most common questions, but also, learning what Morley's been up to and some of the latest research that he's been into. So, Morley, glad to have you on the call.
Delighted to be here and look forward to slaying these dragons of questions and having dialogue as well. So
Excellent.
it's be
Well,
fun.
let's kick it off with an easy one. I think this is a we I've got a list here in front of me, and we're not going to get through all of them, but I think we'll get through a lot of them which cross over. Um, but let's start with an easy one. A lot of people ask us this question, and yeah, I've obviously gone through the root cause protocol in terms of all the material and stuff, but I think it's a really simple one. But it says, what can you tell me about taking copper or recuperate IQ in conjunction with other vitamins, minerals, or nutrients? What might copper interact with? And is there any way that it would interact in a negative way?
It's a really interesting way to ask the question. For the most part, copper is the most underappreciated and misunderstood mineral on the planet. And it's been here a long time. It's been on the planet a long time. We don't need to get into the astrobiology of it, but it's been around a long time. But the one thing that stands out is that when people start to do the RCP, and especially when they get to taking Recuperate, which I think is a very bioavailable form, I would argue is probably one of the most bioavailable forms of copper outside of pre-glyphosate beef liver. Back in the day, we didn't have all those chemicals to deal with. But I think what we've uh, assembled is a very unique formulation for delivering copper into the human body. And copper is really good at mobilizing iron. And so that's one of its conserved jobs on the planet is to make sure that iron stays in circulation and stays in the recycling program of the body. So from that standpoint, um, when people start to uh, introduce copper into their daily routine, they're probably going to see a change in um, stress that's coming from iron being mobilized. And the criticism that copper routinely gets is people could get headaches or they can get nausea. And they always blame copper for that. It's not copper. Copper is mobilizing the iron that's stuck in the brain and stuck in the stomach and stuck in the gut. And once that iron comes out, it's got to be released. That's why we put such emphasis on the phlebotomies, the blood donations. So I think that would be one obvious interaction that I think people need to be aware of. And I think it's entirely positive.
Yeah, with that being, sorry to interrupt you, just give me a second question. So, because I've heard that question from customers a lot. So, the people will start taking Recuperate IQ. I know we suggest low and slow to
Right.
help prevent that. But would you say when people start getting those headaches and those issues with their stomach, is that temporary? Is that something that's like days, weeks? What are we talking?
It's totally temporary. And it's not everyone. It's I think some of the most iron toxic people are the ones that have those symptoms. And it's just a matter of days before it clears, before they begin to realize the body realizes, oh, now we're back in business. But what is important for people to realize is after um, probably a couple months, they've got to be planning to do a blood donation because they're going to have mobilized the stored iron that is, if not released, is going to create more stress in their body. So I think that's something very important for people to be aware of. The other is that there's a, I think there's a tremendous belief that zinc is people's salvation,
Right.
and
That was one of our other questions. I think we can clarify that. There's this we'll call it a myth, or it's our old research. How about we call it that? That people
Yes.
there should always be a 2-to-1, or maybe it's 10-to-1 ratio. I think it's a 10-to-1 of zinc to
Yeah.
copper. Do I need to be concerned about my zinc and taking zinc if I take copper? That's literally one of the other questions here.
Yeah. And tragically, there was never any consideration of that before Carl Pfeiffer in the 1960s. That was never even a consideration. Um, what people don't understand about zinc is it's a really disruptive mineral. It's important, but I think it's been glorified, and it doesn't deserve that recognition. And there is this dynamic between copper and zinc. And the reason why people got into the zinc was back in 2020, a lot of hysteria. We don't need to go into the details of it. And people felt that that was going to stop the replication of the virus, not knowing that copper killed the virus. There's a difference between stopping the replication and killing it. And so no one knew that the copper was actually the better play. But the thing is, I've just found two articles just in the last couple of days by a team out of Japan. Don't often find research on copper out of Japan, but this group they know what they're doing. And they've identified 8 articles, definitive, peer reviewed, very stuffy research that documents how the overemphasis on zinc is causing copper deficiency in humans. And they start the clock at 2020. They said there's been an uptick in this problem. So I think people just need to be aware that there is a dynamic between copper and zinc, and not to be worried about the zinc. You can get zinc in your diet. You know, meats and oysters especially are going to have a rich source of zinc. I think what people may not realize is that the zinc that's in the bottle is really strong.
Yeah.
And I had never read anything about zinc at this level of detail until these 2 articles came along. And it's sort of a take your breath away. It can be a very disruptive mineral, largely because of what it does to copper. And then it goes on to affect iron metabolism. So it's just, people just need to be aware that the focus within the root cause protocol is designed to optimize energy, optimize health. And that's really, we stand behind those stops and starts, and we don't encourage people to take zinc supplements because of that. And we don't encourage people to take iron supplements for the same reason. They don't realize the interplay between those metals.
Sure. So I think I'd be love to get your input on this. So the big thing going around right now is, speaking of getting enough zinc in the diet, is will people eat too many carbs? People eat too many processed carbs, regular carbohydrates, which are
Yeah.
loaded with phytic acid, and phytic acid blocks zinc absorption. So I think the latest trend, how I'll call it, is people are saying, well, we need zinc because we're not absorbing it because we're eating too many carbohydrates. And I think I know your answer, but what are your thoughts on that?
Stop eating so many carbs. That would be the first thing.
That
And
bigger than feeding. Yeah.
no, we recommend having people just follow the principles of the Weston A. Price diet. I think it's the most broad-based, generic way to eat. And I mean, I still get a kick out of the fact that humans are the only animals on the planet that ask each other what to eat. All the other animals have figured it out. They know exactly what to eat, but we rely on this expert and that expert. But I think of a basic omnivore diet that has moderation around carbs, has emphasis on protein and fat. I don't think you're going to have a problem. And so this idea of I think what's really entertaining is people don't know that much about copper, but they worry about not getting enough zinc. I
Right.
think what people should really be worried about is, am I getting enough copper? I think that to me is we are self-medicating around iron, around zinc, around calcium, and people don't realize the second and third order effects of that. So I think our unique position for since the inception of the RCP is start focusing on copper. You're going to get a lot of mileage out of that.
Right. Yeah, and I think you put it very well. And if you could recap it, I guess, in a little nutshell, I think it would help everyone understand. So what you teach in the RCP is that there's a mineral hierarchy. So
Yeah,
so
right,
to kind of walk through it, because you're right. I would venture to say that people really don't know much about zinc either. They don't know much about iron. People, we're talking about customers and the consumers. They really don't know other than what their doctor tells them. So
right,
now we're throwing copper into the mix. We've heard about magnesium, but we don't really understand like where do they all work? I mean, we have this list of them, but what's the hierarchy? And I know that's what you teach very well. So kind of walk through that so we can understand, because I think that answers a lot of these questions is understanding that hierarchy.
right. So depending upon the source, there's anywhere between 82 and 92 minerals on the planet, and depending upon where it happens, where the source of the minerals is. I think the highest concentration is in seawater, but we're left with the impression that it's a horizontal. Everyone's important. No, it's a triangle, and there is a hierarchy as you note. Um, and people probably know that when I started out, I focused on magnesium. That's the answer. Only to find out that I wasn't right. And that was a very humbling, like, oh, wow, there's more to the story. But it didn't take long to get to iron, and it didn't take long to get to copper. Or I should say, it actually took several years. But again, once you get into the research, you'll find how these all line up. But the connection is copper has a unique position on the planet that it can regulate iron and oxygen at the same time and not create static. That's a really big deal because what causes aging is iron and oxygen playing with each other. And it plays inside our body. And so we recognize rust on the outside. Well, there's rusting on the inside. And so we're all subject to that. But what happens is if copper is deficient in the diet, iron is going to rise in the tissue. So as soon as copper is deficient in the diet, you're going to have increased oxidative stress. And that's going to then interact with the iron. And that's going to accelerate the aging process. And when you have rising oxidative stress, the mineral that takes it on the chin is magnesium. Magnesium is always the first mineral to go because of its relationship with what are called kinase enzymes, which respond to stress. And once the kinase enzyme gets fired up, it cleaves off a phosphate, which releases the magnesium, goes right into our urine. So people need to know that there is this interrelationship between copper, iron, magnesium. And if magnesium is being affected, that's going to affect calcium because they have a very dynamic relationship. And I think that zinc is in the mix, but zinc is a structural mineral. It is not a catalytic mineral. It doesn't run anything in the electron transport chain. I'm not aware of any catalytic enzymes or any metabolic enzymes that are dependent upon zinc. And so I think we've been sold a bill of goods, if you will, to think that we've got to have anywhere between 7 to 10 times more zinc. Well, that ratio was actually developed by George Brewer at the University of Michigan. He spent 15 years studying Wilson's disease, which is a disorder of copper metabolism, where copper builds in the body. And so over 15 years, he perfected that if you have about 10 parts zinc to 1 part copper, you're not going to get much copper uptake. that's that's fine if you have Wilson's disease.
I was going to say it works if you have Wilson's, but most of us don't have Wilson's disease.
There's 7,500 people in the United States who have Wilson's disease. So there's 330 million people here, and so the orientation of the research is around those 7,500 people, and everyone else takes it on the chin. It's like, no, we've got to stop that.
It
It's
doesn't
like
work that way.
it doesn't work that way. And so God loves the people that have that condition, but we've got to ease off of our anxiety about zinc and start to really put stock in the importance and the central regulatory priority of copper in the human body.
No, excellent. Very well said. Let's dig a little bit more into this now with copper and what kind of copper. Um,
Right?
we'll just head this one on directly. So I was looking for a bioavailable copper. I came across your site and saw the reference to Morley's book, which I'm reading. And by the way, Morley has the second edition of his book coming out in November here shortly, which everyone should definitely check out. Um, Cure Your Fatigue. He's got a copy of it
Second,
there. It's going to be great.
whoop, right there. Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
We're very excited about that. I suggest everyone certainly pre-order a copy of that. The question is one, sorry, I'm currently, excuse my copper, I have ordered and am currently using Global Healing Bioactive Copper CU1, not downing any other company, just reading the question. Can you
Yep.
help me understand your copper? There is some significance with CU1 versus 2, and I don't understand it. So copper
So,
one, copper two. Um,
right,
and I know that global healing is a big copper out there. That is a big
right.
product, not downing it. But what's the difference between what we're doing, what the body needs, and what the body uses best, and why we created Recuperate?
So the person who really brought this to light was Charlie Barker about 5 or 6 years ago. He was based out of Flagstaff, Arizona. Very smart guy. And he talked about proper copper. Copper one is the proper copper because the plants get exposed to copper two, and they have the ability to convert that copper to. It's called reduction. It's a reduction chemical reaction, and it becomes copper one. And God loved Charlie. He was really trying to develop a really solid product. But I said very early on, I said, well, you're not taking into account ceruloplasmin, which is the copper protein that I think pretty much runs our body. Now, I'm not sure that conventional medicine would agree with that, but I have compelling evidence that I'm right and they're wrong. But the fact of the matter is, Charlie criticized me for 2 solid years publicly, saying that ceruloplasmin has nothing to do with copper. I said, Charlie, you sure you want to say that? And he kept beating his chest, and then he realized, oh my gosh, Morley's right, I'm wrong. And to his credit, he publicly apologized for his stance. The part that people don't realize is that ceruloplasmin is managing the copper one, copper two inside our body. And so all of this hysteria about, oh, I've got to have the right copper, it's like, calm down. The body knows what to do with these minerals and can manage the flux. So I don't put a lot of stock in this proper copper argument just because the goal, the whole objective of the root cause protocol was to increase the capacity of the body to make more ceruloplasmin, a protein that most people have never heard of, including your doctors have never heard of. I mean, they may have heard it in one lecture in medical school talking about Wilson's
You can
disease,
measure
by
this
the
on
way.
blood tests, though, right? Correct? You can measure blood
You
work.
absolutely can measure it. And we do it routinely as part of the root cause protocol. But I think what I regard as um, I guess the biological advantage of Recuperate is you have the cofactors. You have, I think, a very bioavailable form with copper bisglycinate just out of the blocks. But you've got the desiccated beef liver, you've got the spirulina, you've got the turmeric. These are really important factors for really enabling copper to do what it does best. And then we have the added advantage of, do you want it with or without boron? So I think that the Recuperate, to me, and again, it sounds like we're justifying something that we helped create, but it's like I think a lot of thought went into that product design, and it's like comparing a Formula One car to a VW,
Right.
and it's like there's a lot of design that goes into a Formula One car. And I give you all the credit, Mike, because you were the formulator that said, I think I know what you're trying to do. Give me a couple weeks and bingo bongo. And so I think what people get wrapped around is what's the cheapest form of copper I can buy? Like, that's not the question. You're asking the wrong question. The question is, what's the most bioavailable form of copper I can take? And just, surrender to that decision because that's really what we're trying to do. I've had just a couple weeks ago, I had someone, I'm not going to name names, no other products, but it was a pure copper bisglycinate. They weren't getting any zip doodah. They started to take recuperate like that. They said, oh my, they could, it was like they were in a car that suddenly had this acceleration that they didn't realize. And so that sounds self-serving, but it's like at the end of the day, I think what we share is this desire to help people
Right.
and to help people help themselves. That's really, at the end of the day, I mean, the whole idea of IQ, you're trying to bring back the intelligence of the body with the supplements that you sell. And I just think people need to be um, a little bit more reflective about what am I really trying to do. It's not a money play.
No.
This is what it's an engineering play. Who has the best engineered form of copper? And let's focus on that because better engineering is going to lead to better energy and better metabolic processes. That's how I would approach it.
I completely agree. And I think the importance of what you're saying as well is, and that's the whole thesis of the basis of the root cause protocol is it's about bioavailable copper. It's not even about copper, it's about bioavailable copper and
Right.
bioavailable minerals. It's about making sure that they're all bioavailable, which means they're all usable. And in order to do that, we need cofactors. And
Yeah.
that's the difference between the recuperate. And again, I'm not trying to pitch or peddle the product. At the end of the day, it's different than taking just a standard copper product because you need cofactors, you need your B vitamins, you need your retinol for the enzyme activation pathways, you need the additional complete minerals which the spirulina provides, and you have food forms of copper from the beef liver and spirulina, and then boron plays a role in there as well, and plus you have curcumin, which helps pull out additional or chelates stored iron. So, there's a little bit more to the equation. And I think that's what people really have to understand with this is, copper is one piece, but our goal is to make bioavailable copper. And that requires additional cofactors to do that. Um, so going into now understanding the right form of copper and understanding what we're taking and why we're taking it. Another question that we get a lot, and I'll paraphrase this question, but basically it's twofold. She wanted to know if her daughter can take it. Her daughter's a 17-year-old runner, so she's athletic. She's an
Yep.
endurance athlete. Just be beneficial for her. Um, and the second part of the question can someone take too much copper? And is it something that they should take on an ongoing basis? Like,
Okay. Great questions. Um, well, the 17-year-old runner, uh, I would bet she has signs of anemia. My three oldest kids were runners, and you're an athlete. I'm a pretend athlete. I ran a couple marathons, but no, I've never really been a competitive athlete. But anyone who isn't into athletics, the fuel of athletics is adrenaline.
mhm.
It's not what you eat. It's you get into a competitive situation and you're running on chemistry, some very sophisticated chemistry. Well, that adrenaline causes a rise of um, hepcidin, and this is a hormone that people may or may not have heard of. But the long story short is that adrenaline causes hepcidin to rise, which causes iron to be sequestered into the recycling system.
Mhm.
And and then iron looks low on the blood test. And so as I understand it, many, if not most, Division One athletes in this country are taking iron supplements because they show anemic on the blood test, and no one's aware of this metabolic dynamic that's actually taking place fueled by adrenaline. But the reason why the recuperate is so important is recuperate's going to calm down that hepcidin. recuperate is going to power the whatever the competitive pursuit is. And so I think it really um, it's the one mineral that trainers don't know about.
Right. Yeah, no, you got a great point. So now I'll add clarification, as a competitive athlete, you're right. So if I put my blood work, I have to be careful. So if I look at my standard blood work, and basically this is a metabolic panel or comprehensive metabolic panel, let's just say that's what a doctor would order. It would actually make me look as if I was anemic because
Right,
I
right,
operate as an athlete, constantly training in the gym, doing cardio, etc. And so my iron levels will appear low, but that's not the whole story. But that's all that doctors will go off of, and that's all, a standard insurance blood panel will look. I have to then look at my percentage of saturation. I have to look at my ferritin. I have to look at, my magnesium status. I have to look at all the other factors of what, you call it the full Monty panel of your blood work. Because if I
right.
did, then I would be taking iron supplements all the time because I would assume based upon my iron levels that I'm anemic, but it's not that I'm anemic. I'm just keeping a lot of iron in my tissues because I'm an athlete.
Exactly,
Push there.
exactly, exactly. And so the second part of the question is, how long do we need to take copper for the rest of your life, especially given the state of the food system in Western civilization? I think people don't realize how scarce copper is. It's been the number one nutrient deficiency on the farm for at least 60 years. And so um, it's the Achilles mineral. It's the one that's most vulnerable to stress for a wide variety of reasons, and it's the least available in our diet. And so that's why there's this unique positioning within the RCP. Let's focus on copper and ceruloplasmin, but it's a lifestyle issue. It's not a um, program that's going to end in a couple months. It really needs to be part of your ongoing expectations.
Right. And I would say to the question of can you take too much copper? I think we've talked about this before, but I know the National Institute of Health has a 10 milligram cap on copper. I know you've seen people who've taken a lot more than that short term, I believe. Um,
Yep,
I think
yep.
what we think 2 to 4 milligrams is a safe range ongoing for people. What are you suggesting now?
When I'm working with clients, I always tell them to start with one capsule, which is 2 milligrams, get up to two capsules, 4 milligrams, and see if they can tolerate 3 or 4. And I don't, as a rule, go above that. Um, and yeah, you're right. The upper tolerable limit within NIH is I think it's actually 12 milligrams,
Well,
not 10, it's 12 milligrams. But the thing is, um, the part that people aren't aware of is the elegant systems that the body has to keep track of the copper, and the excess gets removed in our bile and in our feces. And so it's just, I think people have been, the concept of copper toxicity is prevalent in a lot of people's consciousness, but that's I think, a flawed term as well. But the thing is, the body knows what to do with that copper. And if you go back in time, the average American diet back in the 1930s delivered 4 to 6 milligrams of copper a day. 30 years later, by the 1960s, it had dropped to 2 to 5 milligrams. That's a big drop. And now the RDA for copper is 9 tenths of 1 milligram. And so I don't think it's um, I don't think it's prudent to think that you're going to get too much at this point. Again, we're back to the symptoms we talked about a few minutes ago: the headache, the nausea. You start to exceed that, and what you're going to be doing is you're mobilizing deeper levels of iron in the body. And I think the part that people don't realize is how sophisticated our body is to hide that iron and to keep it away from the blood test. And probably the most noted study on that was by Bruce Ames back in 2004 and 2005, where they discovered that there can be 10 times more iron in the tissue and shows up in the blood. And so I think we have this very naive um, perception about how much iron we have because everyone thinks they're anemic. And so it's just a very slippery slope. But no, I don't think, I think you want to be prudent about it. And I think you can be aggressive about it. But I don't think you should be worrying about getting too much if you're staying within the restrictions that we talk about within the RCP.
Right. Excellent. Um, so this kind of leads to the same question, the same category of this. Taking copper during breastfeeding should, and I think there's an obvious answer, but should someone take more or less if they're breastfeeding, given the dynamic of that situation?
Great question. I was talking with a nutrition colleague over in London yesterday morning, and she has a client who's 43 years old, who's, let's just say she's not the healthiest chimp on the planet. And she put her on the RCP. And this woman has two children, wasn't feeling great until she got to the RCP, and she got pregnant. And now she has an 8 week old. She has her third son now, who's 8 weeks old. And the beauty of the story is that this woman is just thrilled to be pregnant again and to have another child. Um, and there's a whole strata of babies being born out there, being born out in society now. They're called RCP babies. The couples that were having trouble conceiving, in fact, get pregnant and have very healthy children. As it relates to the breastfeeding side,
Rewind for a second. I'm curious. So why do you think that is? Because I think that's a good question. We do get asked that some, I don't have that in front of me, but so why do you think the RCP for people who are having trouble conceiving, why do you think that fixes it? What's the difference?
any animal farmer knows if his animals are having trouble conceiving, they increase the copper supplement in the feed because the copper is needed as an antioxidant. There's a tremendous burst of resistance between the egg and the sperm,
Mhm.
and the copper needs to be there to overcome that oxidative resistance. And so it's a known fact in farming circles that copper will help animals conceive, including us two-legged rats. And so the thing is, the when a woman is after she's delivered the baby, she's going to have, and she chooses to breastfeed. The first milk that comes out is called colostrum. And everyone, I'm sure people have heard of it. And the people, there's supplements out there, milk, bovine colostrum. Well, what colostrum has is a very high concentration of what's called apoliactoferrin. Lactoferrin is a very powerful enzyme that chelates iron out of the tissue. Apo means it's empty. You want empty lactoferrin. Believe it or not, they sell holo lactoferrin. It's like, wait a minute, why would you sell an enzyme that already has the iron attached to it? It's just like, drives me crazy. But the apoliactoferrin, there's this enormous surge of apoliactoferrin in the mother's breast milk when she starts to uh, feed the baby. And the reason why is that the infant doesn't develop an immune system for the first 2 years of life. And
Wow.
ideally, they're relying on mom to deliver the copper, the ceruloplasmin, and the retinol. Most of the components of breast milk are retinol. When a
Right.
woman finishes breastfeeding, she's going to be retinol deficient. But that nutrient combination forms the basis of the infant's immune system for the first 2 years of life. So, if anything, I'd say absolutely. And in fact, you probably want to be very um, generous with the copper just to ensure that the baby has vitality in their capacity to respond to um, any pathogens that might come their way. So I think when you step back from it, all of the caution in conventional obstetrics is the inverse of Mother Nature.
Mm.
We
Yeah.
shouldn't be worried. We shouldn't be worried about retinol when you're pregnant. Shouldn't be worried about taking copper. Shouldn't all these things that we've been quote trained to be leery of. In fact, produce a much more resilient and healthy child. And it's just more of the inversion of the truth.
Right. So we're talking about, so I'll expand upon this a little bit. So we're talking about retinol because I think that's a great point. And I know pregnancy is a huge topic. I know we have a lot of people who come to us with those questions. When we say retinol, we're talking about cod liver oil, correct?
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Not a synthetic, not a retinol palmitate. We're talking about cod liver oil. Yeah.
we're talking about cod liver oil, which is naturally rich in retinol. And if I remember correctly, you suggest people during pregnancy or breastfeeding need to take an additional retinol. Is that correct? So what do you suggest around cod liver oil and retinol in terms of that? And remember, we're using, I guess for people listening, we're using cod liver oil in this context, not only just for omega-3s, but also for its natural occurring, not fortified, but natural occurring retinol content. And it has natural occurring vitamin D in it as well. And
Right.
that's context. So how much are you recommending that people take in during pregnancy and breastfeeding?
Probably enhanced by 25% what they would take otherwise.
Right.
And if they want to go above that, like up as much as 50%, I think they'll be fine. Again, when you find out that breast milk is basically retinol, why is there this caution? Why is and you really when you get into the research to find out what are the nutrients that are important for healthy fetal neural development, it's magnesium, copper, and retinol. Three most important nutrients. That's the basis of the root cause protocol.
And
So I
it's
think people,
and that's still what we all should do. That's why it's the basis of the
that's right.
well, like
Well, yeah, no,
yeah.
yeah, because we're constantly. See, the part that people might not know is that we're constantly recycling our tissue.
Mhm.
We are one giant recycling system, and it slows down as we get older. Um, but the thing is, most of the recycling enzymes depend on copper. It's a really good thing to know. They don't, the autophagy doesn't work well, and that's the formal name for recycling. It doesn't work well without copper, and so it's just getting people to embrace the breadth and depth of what copper does inside the body.
Let's switch gears for a second. We're getting towards the end of the questions here. I don't want to be respectful of time for everyone. Um, so we talked about the importance of copper. We talked about the importance of magnesium. We talked about the importance of retinol, which comes from cod liver oil. Where does we have common questions of adrenal fatigue? So someone's like, I have adrenal fatigue and excess ferritin in my blood for 5 to 6 years, and I need help knowing how to get it out and what I'm supposed to take with excess ferritin and how to get it out of my liver. So I think the question is great. We can address how to get the ferritin. I think we know the answer to that is, bioavailable copper. But where does adrenal fatigue and where does adrenal and where does whole food vitamin C come into this and potassium? Because I know that's a key part of the root cause protocol. And we have our whole CIQ, which covers that component. I would say that's probably the fourth on the tier in terms of the things we just talked about. So what is the significance of that?
Well, I think it's important for people to know that 95% of the whole food vitamin C that's used to support our metabolism is stored in the adrenal glands. And we're not talking about ascorbic acid. We're talking about the full strength, six-part whole food complex, vitamin C complex. Um, in this particular case, where someone has elevated ferritin and they have for several years, what they want to do is get into a very regimented program of blood donations. Like what really got me into this work was discovering that my serum ferritin was 237. It's
Uh,
like, and where I want to have it is around 20. And I mean, I freaked out. And so I donated blood every other month for a year and got it down into the 30s. And that's pretty much where it stayed ever since then. But they need to do that. Also, what's really important beyond what we're going to talk about in a minute, they need to be doing castor oil packs over their liver. And castor oil has quercetin, but it also has a specific um, uh, component. It's a nutrient, and I'm blanking on its name. It begins with an R, but it's an iron chelator.
right.
And so the castor oil seeps into the tissue and begins to pull that iron out, which is very, very important. Um, but most people that we work with have some level of adrenal fatigue, just because of the life that we live, the the stress that we're under, the added stress because of a diminished nutrient dense food system. It's just there are many factors that begin to put added stress on our adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands love minerals. They especially love sodium and magnesium, but potassium is also very, very important for the vitality of the adrenal glands. And they're supposed to be the size of walnuts. Under stress, they become about the size of peas. Well, they're very tiny, but they will grow back. But it requires nutrients to do it. And the most important nutrients would be magnesium and the sodium and the potassium and the vitamin C, which is what you get in the adrenal cocktail. And so, and the most important nutrient of all, and I personally went through this because I was a very hard charging consultant for a number of years, got by on 4 hours sleep, thought I was Superman, and then found out I wasn't Superman. And it took me almost a year of 9 hours of sleep to restore my adrenals. So the nutrient that's most important for restoring the adrenals is vitamin Z, which people don't like taking because that means I have to turn the TV off or the monitor off or whatever game I'm playing. But the people have got to get their rest. It's so important. And where it's especially important is removing iron from the brain. It's incredibly important. The noradrenaline that gets released during the nighttime hours has this capacity to clear iron, which is really good to know. And so I just came across that a few months ago. But the key is knowing that the body does have this capacity to rebuild itself, knowing that the body does have this resilience, but it can't do it without directed nutrient focus. And that's really what the RCP is all about. And that's really what the basis of your whole focus within your product lines is, helping people to restore those key components of their metabolism so that they can, in fact, deal with the stress of life.
I think that's great. That's a very well way to round it out and to put it. Um, the last one that I think that I want to cover, and I forgot about this question. This is more, I think, more of a discussion for us. And I think this is actually where I've learned a new research because when they first came out, it was thought that it would alter blood levels. So we're talking about the copper peptide creams now. When I say copper peptide, I mean GHK-Cu.
Yeah,
So when they first came out, it was commonly thought, that copper peptide would increase serum copper levels in the blood. And as research has gone on, we found out that it's minimal if it does for individuals. Um,
right.
I think so. Now I think that leads to the question of well, what's the application of using copper peptide and is it? And I think a lot of people will ask, even because there's injectable forms of copper peptide now,
Mhm.
is that a solution? Can I does that increase my serum copper levels? My opinion is no, not optimally. That's still, it doesn't recuperate because it's not a free form of copper. Um, but is there a place in the RCP, and I believe there is, for copper peptide for topical solutions for skin health? Because
Yeah,
copper is very important for skin and tissue health. And I think that's really where copper peptide or GHK-Cu comes in, is it's really the tissue portion of copper and where it has its benefits, which has obviously, and we all want to look younger, we all want to heal faster. And so what's the application of that? And what's your take on copper peptide?
I think it's an amazing part of the spectrum of what we offer. And I think the need for topical is very high. Uh, so many people have skin disorders, connective tissue disorders. They They might have gut dysbiosis, so they're not going to be digesting as well. And I regularly encourage people to use topical forms of copper, and I get really good results. Um, Half the battle is getting people to believe that their body has this innate intelligence to heal itself. It just needs the right nutrients. Um, I never, when I first got into this work, um, I became aware of Lauren Pickard, who developed a company called Reverse Skin Aging, and and he had this product, GHK Copper. I never got any buzz from it as a supplement. It wasn't the topical, but the supplement itself. But I think the topical has legitimacy as part of an overall routine to restore the vitality of the tissue from the outside in, just as we're doing with nutrition inside out. And so I think we actually benefit from doing both. And I just think that the other key is not just measuring the copper in the serum, it's what's the level of ceruloplasmin in your serum. Now, ideally, what we really want to be able to do is measure how intelligent is that ceruloplasmin? What's the enzyme function? Well, we're not allowed to do that. There's restrictions on that. But I have great results. People that I've trained have great results recommending people use the transdermal in the topical forms. And I think the serum is particularly noteworthy. I think it's again, I don't particularly like the creams. Maybe it's a guy thing. I don't know, but the serum is amazing what it does, and I stand by it. I really do.
Yeah, no, to be honest, we sell probably 3 to 1 of the serum to the cream. I'm the same way.
Cream.
I think my wife loves the cream.
Yep.
She loves putting it on. I just can't do it. I love the serum. That maybe it's the aloe vera in it. Like I'll put it on my face
Yep.
if I
Yep.
have a
Right.
wound or something. But no, I'm a firm believer of that. This specific question was asking about nerve regeneration, blood vessel, and capillary growth and stuff. Does it pass through the outer tissue of the skin? And the answer is yes.
Absolutely does.
It
Yes, it
does.
does.
Yeah.
Absolutely does.
I
Yeah.
think I think that's what people really need to understand is that you said it perfectly. With copper peptide, we're talking about the outward in approach, not the inside out approach. And that,
Right.
the other aspect with recuperate IQ. Um, well, great. I think we've covered most of the questions. A lot of these are redundant, but I think we've covered most of these. Um,
That's great.
I'd love to. So we talked about it briefly earlier though, to wrap things up. So you showed us a picture of it. So what is different about Cure Your Fatigue, the second edition? I know you're launching your book, I think November 10th and 11th is the launch dates, if I remember
Uh,
correctly.
yep. Armistice Day, November 11th. Absolutely.
November 11th, that was
Um,
close.
that's right. And why the publisher chose that date, I have no idea. That's kind of entertaining. Um, what's different about it is it's a tighter version. It's got more information about what copper does. I think that's one of its main selling points. There's an entire chapter on women's health, which is very unique. I think if women knew how copper deficient they were, they'd be a lot less stressed about all of their many conditions, things like PCOS, PMS, um, endometriosis. I mean, it's just staggering what the role that the bioavailable copper plays to avoid those conditions. Um, we've taken some of the redundancy out of it. When we first we tell them again, tell them we don't need to do that now. It's going to be a tighter editorial version, and we took the venom out. I think even with it's very tempting to blame. You're always looking for someone to blame for the problem. We're not worried about who's to blame. We're just making sure people know there's a solution. And then I think the final selling point of the book is the the footnotes in version one were, we'll just say, sophomoric. We'll be kind. Um, but by the grace of God, and I do mean the grace of God, one friend and neighbor just down the street, like 100 yards that way, um, he has a PhD from UNC in informatics and library science. and I let him loose on the footnotes, and it has rigor now. I mean, the citations were there, but they didn't have the cachet. Now they have cachet. So if anyone wants a book that they can hand to their doctor, hand to a friend, hand to a family member, say, look, there's wisdom here. Uh, read up on it. And in a recent doctor visit that the Dr. Liz and I had, we were going to see a GI because she was having some issues. And I handed him a copy of my book. And mind you, he spent 14 years after college getting his education. So he's got an MD and a PhD, very, very highly regarded in his field. And he held the book. He's like, he said, I had no idea you could write a whole book on copper. And I said, have fun reading it. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what his reaction is. But I left him with this one question. I said, you of course have heard of Crohn's disease. He said, absolutely. He said, I have a lot of clients who have that condition. I said, have you heard of Jonas disease? He said, yes, I have. He said, it's very common in dairy cattle. I said, yeah, the symptoms are identical. Jonas and Crohn's are identical conditions, just named differently because they're four-legged versus two-legged. I said, do you know how they treat Jonas disease in veterinary medicine? He said, actually, I don't. I said, they use copper. And he was like, wow. So now I know he's going to read the book. So I think the book cuts to the chase, and I think people will enjoy kind of revisiting some of the things they learned. But we're going to go a little bit deeper and give them a little bit more meat for the bone. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Excellent. And people can get that on Amazon.com, Barnes and Nobles, your website directly, which is therootcauseprotocol.com,
Yep.
which contact you there directly as well if they have any questions. So I think
Yeah.
that's great. Any final thoughts or anything, new research, things you want to leave us with?
Um, the one pearl I'll leave with people, which you and I talked about before we actually started up the recording. Um, we're really big into stress and managing stress within the RCP. What I want to make sure people understand is that when we're under repeated stress, chronic stress, iron starts to accumulate in the mitochondria. That's why it's not showing up in the blood. And iron building in your mitochondria is not your friend. And so I think what we're really trying to emphasize is the importance not just of the nutrient program that we have, which we feel very strongly about, and very grateful to have your support in providing just tremendous options for people. But we really encourage people, you've got to manage the stress side of your life because the research around chronic stress and its impact on our metabolism is breathtaking. So I just want people to know that we have a great program. The foundation of the RCP is rock solid. We've got great supplement options, but they've got to deal with the iron, with the blood donations, but they've got to deal with the stress. And they've got to release that stress on a regular basis. So I think it's a comprehensive program of getting people to lower the oxidative stress in their body to ensure greater longevity in their life. And that's really the basis of the RCP. So hopefully that will serve people well who come to your website.
I definitely think so. We have, for those who are interested in doing the root cause protocol, we have multiple layers. We have to start off, we have our RCP quick start guide, which is basically just how to use our supplements with the root cause protocol, which we worked with you, Morley, on creating. That's a very condensed form. And then you have your root cause protocol, the workbook, and I believe you guys have consolidated a little bit now that people can download at therootcauseprotocol.com, which kind of gives them
Right.
more meat now to go through. And then I always tell people that the book, Cure Your Fatigue, if you want to understand the why, you want to understand the science, the research, and the in-depth stuff, the book Cure Your Fatigue is an excellent resource for that. So three really good ways that we can meet people with answers and solutions, that you can all find on our website at formulaiq.com, and of course, Morley at therootcauseprotocol.com. So Morley, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me in this conversation.
Absolutely. I really appreciate the chance to have this conversation. And I know there'll be more, but this is a really good chance to answer some key questions that people have. So appreciate that.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate it, Morley. Thank you.
Bye bye.